What up, guys? Welcome to another episode of The Sit Down. I am your host, Pearl, and today I have a special guest, Bronte Remzik. Welcome to the show. Family medical resident, right?
Yes.
And TikTok sensation. You have over 500,000 followers on TikTok. And I would say your content is pro-feminist, right?
Yeah, I would agree.
And anything I missed?
No, not
No?
necessarily. That's pretty much sums it up.
Welcome to the show. First off, I want to say thank you so much for coming. You came all the way out to our Chicago studio. And I always appreciate sitting down with people that disagree. And so I think it's great that we can do this.
Yeah, I agree. I've come across your videos quite a few times, and I've had a lot of my audience ask me, like, oh, have you ever thought about talking to Pearl? And then you reached out to me. So I was like, perfect. So
Yeah.
I'm happy to be here.
So I think me and you maybe have different views on feminism. So why don't we start with what your general, I really just want to understand your general worldview. So what is your definition of feminism?
So, my definition of feminism is probably the broad overarching definition, which would be wanting equal opportunity and representation for women and, feminine presenting people. I think that we should be equally represented in political and other kinds of positions of power. I think that we should be advocated for in our unique life circumstances and the things that make us, uniquely feminine. And I think that we need to ensure that women have all the opportunity that men are afforded.
So is your view today that we're not being given the opportunity that we are? Like what is your view on feminism historically and like where is it needed today?
Yeah, so I think where this conversation, especially in sort of like conservative spheres,
Yeah.
gets confusing is that you tend to focus more on like legal barriers, that there's
Okay.
no laws that are preventing women from obtaining certain opportunities, applying for certain jobs, going to schools, things like that. Where the more nuanced and modern view is there are no longer any legal barriers, but there are still plenty of societal barriers. There's a lot of discrimination, things like not having like maternity leave, the caregiving gap, things like that, that disproportionately inhibit women from being able to go after certain opportunities because of the responsibilities that heavily, rely on us
Mhm.
instead of having a lot of that labor and unpaid domestic labor
Mhm.
seen, respected, and divided.
Okay. So how does that translate in 2024? Like how would that have affected me, for example?
Well, I can't speak to you and your life
Well,
experience,
yeah,
but
but
I can
some
speak to
yeah,
mine.
okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So, as a woman in medicine, that is a very long journey. I got my bachelor's degree, my master's degree,
Mhm.
my doctorate, and now I'm
Well,
in a,
yeah, but just like a guy,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
well, but I'll explain to
Okay, yeah,
you
go
how
ahead,
it has
sorry.
affected me. So, and I'm currently in residency, which is my postdoctoral training. And so, a lot of this I've needed to dedicate
Mhm.
80 plus hours a week to studying, to working in order to be able to have my dream job.
Mhm.
And so something like starting a family has needed to be delayed because the from a biological perspective, I have to keep in mind that I
Mhm.
do have a bit of a time clock, but that the academic um, path that that I've been on has
Mhm.
primarily been designed for men, and
Mhm.
there's not the opportunities available to me to take pauses and to take maternity leave and to do a lot of the things that
Mhm.
women have to do in order to be able to go after the things that we want and get everything we want out of life. And so and also there was a lot of times when I was in pre-med where people would be like, "Oh, are you sure you want to do that?" Like
Mhm.
that's a very male dominated field, things like that. And so there was constant doubt being pushed at me from a young age of like whether or not I should do this, whether or not I could do this, and none of my male peers ever encountered that.
Mhm.
And the same thing with like people would ask me about oh, but like, what about starting a family? Like, oh, why are you choosing your career over family? And none of my male peers ever had that question. And so, from a societal perspective, it's really just the assumption that women can't have both career and family.
Mhm.
And it's not true, but a lot of those barriers are because we don't allow our system to accommodate for those needs and the differences that men and women have when it comes to enduring pregnancy, childbearing, childcare, things like that.
So you started with academic. How are there barriers in the academic field when the majority of scholarships in STEM go to women? And
Yes.
there's entire like there's women for like there's entire parts of organizations that are pushing women to go into STEM, and it's really not the same for men.
Right. And so I think again, this goes towards like you have this idea of more strict legal
Hmm.
or like actual barriers to
Hmm.
access,
Hmm.
where I'm talking in a more nuanced way of the timeline that women find themselves in, people who are already mothers, people who want to become mothers. A lot of it does come down to families and child rearing and
Hmm.
the responsibilities that you have to balance both academically and with your family. But even outside of like the family dynamic, just the discrimination that women will experience when it comes to us wanting to achieve these higher level degrees and these more rigorous academic and like professional settings.
Hmm.
A lot of people will automatically have doubt that we're capable of doing it, and that comes from like a societal.
Who are the people? Like, who was saying this to you? Was it like how often did this happen?
It happened a lot, especially in undergrad when I was pre-med.
Hmm.
I was in a
Like, was it from your family? Was it once a
Mhm.
week? Like, I'm trying to understand the frequency of this discrimination.
Yeah, so not my immediate family. My
Mhm.
immediate family has always been my biggest cheerleaders,
Okay.
but definitely extended family, people. I was in a sorority in Texas, so definitely
Mhm.
people who I encountered in undergrad. A lot of my professors and advisors, like
Mhm.
they'd be like, "Oh, this is a really rigorous."
Mhm.
Path to go down, like, are you sure that you want to?
Mhm.
And then I would speak to a lot of my male peers who were like in pre-med, the same track as me, and I'd
Mhm.
ask like, has anyone ever told you like you couldn't do this or that you should think about
Well,
something else? And they would all say
do you
no.
think it's because women quit more? Because I mean, the data shows that women quit careers in STEM quicker than men.
Right. And that goes back to what I was talking
Mhm.
about, right? Because you have to look at the reasons that they're quitting.
Mhm.
And a lot of times it's because of things like discrimination against them,
Mhm.
which creates a hostile work environment and a hostile academic environment, or they're not able to balance like
But,
the
like, what
needs of
is
their
the
family.
discrimination? It just sounds like it's words you don't like. Like, people say words that they don't like to men all the time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm here, right? I'm a
Yeah.
doctor now, so it
Mhm.
didn't bother me, but I think it's pretty disingenuous to believe that those words don't have an impact because words do matter. And when undergrad is 4 years plus, my master's was 1
Mhm.
year, my doctorate was 4 years. And so that's 9 years of my life that I've had to endure people constantly bringing doubt to my ability
Mhm.
to accomplish this goal. And I did it anyways, and I'm
Mhm.
extremely proud of that.
But
But I also, let me finish.
mhm.
I also don't fault a lot of women for giving into that pressure and having those years and years of people pushing that doubt onto them. Of course, it's going to seep into a lot of them and they're going to have that self doubt because of all of the external doubt that's fed their way.
Yeah, but I think the world doesn't care. And men understand when they go into the world that the world does not care about their problems and how they feel. And the problem is women go into a man's world and think that the world should care about how they feel and their problems.
See, and I think of it as the opposite way. I don't think that it's good that men's feelings aren't cared about. I think that we should care about everyone's feelings. I think that we should realize that our words matter and the way
Mhm.
that our words impact people matter. And it shouldn't go to like, oh, well, men don't care, so we should just say whatever we want and you
Mhm.
shouldn't care. I think it's the opposite. I think that we need to be more compassionate and we need to understand the way that we impact people.
And that's totally great if we have a wish list, but this is the real world and not the way that we want the world to be. And the problem is women go into a man's world and they have no idea how harsh it is and how mean they are to each other. And if you've ever been in a male only dominated environment, like where it's pretty much all men, there's only one or two women, they're harsher than women are. They're more direct, they speak in a different way. And the problem is women go into these spaces and they think that men should talk like women talk and they don't.
Right. Well, again, I'm a dreamer, right?
Yeah.
I think when
But
I
it's not
take part.
realistic is the point.
And I disagree. I think it's completely realistic to take people's feelings into account. It's called empathy. I
Mhm.
think that we need to promote empathy. I don't think that we should promote such a callous, harsh world. I think that we all need to be more kind and compassionate to each other. And I also think that the mental health outcomes of men proves that that's not a good way to endure the world.
Right, but good is not like hope is not a strategy. The way that we want the world to be isn't how it is. So it's really nice and dandy to say the world should be this way, but it isn't. And men have an understanding of how the world is and they don't complain. So the thing is, you keep talking about.
They complain all the time.
So I'll give you an example. So you're talking about all this stuff that you endured in your career, and that's fine. I think it's really great that you're a doctor. Like it's very impressive. That's hard to do, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was
okay,
very
yeah.
hard to do. Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, I'll give you props. However, when I have a cousin that works on a crab fishing boat in Alaska where a guy dies every single week so that we can get crabs, like, literally one person dies a week on that crab fishing boat in Alaska.
Mhm.
I don't have a lot of empathy for people that say these words hurt my feelings and therefore I'm oppressed. They don't complain. They don't, cry about work conditions. They just do their job. And it's a male-dominated field. Women are not doing those jobs.
Yeah, so that's called the fallacy of relative pervasion. So
Mhm,
saying that somebody else has it worse off
mhm,
means that we shouldn't be able to talk about smaller problems. Like
mhm,
that's a fallacy. Both things can be problems and both deserve to be talked about.
mhm,
I don't think that it's right that one person dies a week on crab fishing boats. I don't eat crab. I don't think it's
mhm,
necessary. And I am not saying that we shouldn't fish for crab, like whatever, but we shouldn't say, oh, people die all the time in this
mhm.
career, and just because your feelings are hurt, I don't have to care. Like that's not an appropriate
Well,
way to
I
look at
I
the
think
world.
what I'm getting at is how spoiled it makes people that complain about those things seem when there are men dying to do jobs to give us crab and put different food on the table, or even the number one workplace fatality for men in the Midwest is logging. So, when you're sitting on a chair that's made of wood that a guy died to get here, it makes you look pretty spoiled when we're saying, "Oh, but people said mean words to me in my career." And
See,
it's not just you. Like I think it's just overall females' careers. We're not really dying to put food on the table. We're not dying to build the buildings. We're not dying to do any of these things. And so I don't think we really have a right to complain that we're so oppressed when men are doing most of the hard jobs in society.
yeah, I mean, you're allowed to have that opinion. It's the wrong opinion, but you're allowed to have it.
Okay.
I don't think that anybody should die at their job. I think that if we really want to talk about the way that men enter into these dangerous career paths and the way
Mhm,
that their lives are just seen as fodder, like they are just, seen as expendable. And I think that's wrong. I think that there is space for both conversations.
mhm,
There's a space to say that men don't deserve to be harmed in their workplace the
mhm.
same way that women don't deserve to be harmed in their
But
workplace.
men understand that that's the only way things get done.
I don't agree with that.
Well, you cannot agree, but how else has it ever been done?
You think that we have to.
Men have always died to protect and build civilizations.
Yeah, and civilization is
Always.
supposed to progress. Civilization is supposed to improve on itself. If we stay stagnant, then we're doing it wrong. If we're looking at these careers and saying, hey, people are dying, we
Mhm,
should look at why they're dying and we
mhm.
should address it and we should fix it. We shouldn't just accept it.
Yeah, and I think that's a very female way of looking at things because you've never been in that position where you have to pragmatically solve those types of problems.
Hmm.
The same way I'm not going to know how to stop the men dying on fishing boats, you're not going to know either.
Right, that's not
So,
my
but it's
job, but
right,
there
right.
there
But
are
it's
people
easy,
who
but it's
have
easy
jobs.
to say, oh, this shouldn't happen. The same way we could say, like, we shouldn't have anyone die in war, but we want to be safe.
Do you not think that there are people whose job is dedicated to improving worker safety? Like those jobs exist. It's not my job, it's not your job, but those jobs exist.
Hmm.
And you should argue that they need to have more responsibility. They need to be doing their job better. Like workers' unions,
Hmm.
safety commissions, like there are actual jobs and committees and boards dedicated to worker safety. And if they're not doing their jobs appropriately, then that's a totally separate conversation.
Yeah, and again, this is all stuff that sounds nice, but it's just not very pragmatic. Again, men have always died to protect and build civilization. The difference is in the past, they used to get thank you and an appreciation, and now they don't. Because feminism has convinced women that our jobs are equally as important to men's, and they're not.
Yeah, and society is the only reason society exists is because it is built on the backs of the unpaid and unrecognized labor of women.
Mhm.
Sure, men have died in war, men have died in dangerous jobs, and I would argue that if women were in charge, we would
Mhm.
have less war and we would have less death,
It's
but that's
not
a whole.
true. Women have waged more war in the last 500 years when they were rulers.
Yeah, and you also have to look at who they had as their representatives and for their counsel because this
Okay.
has been like highly studied that it
Mhm.
wasn't necessarily their individual choice. A lot of it was like pressure from
Right.
their
Whenever
committees.
women make a bad decision, women have the privilege of blaming it on someone else where men have to take the fall.
That's an interesting perspective. I disagree.
So, going back to, do you agree that men do most of the most difficult and needed jobs in society?
No.
Okay. how would society keep running without men doing the infrastructure jobs like logging, fishing, trucking,
Oh, do
Amaz
you mean like in the world wars when men left and women took over those positions and we ran the entire country and took over the jobs that you say that we couldn't do?
No, they didn't take over the majority of the jobs.
We did.
They did. They took over factory positions.
We took over the positions that
They
men
were not
left.
they were not doing the electrical, they were not doing the plumbing, they were not building the buildings, they were not
There are
paving the
women
roads.
electricians, there are women plumbers, like there are females in all of these positions. There are
Is it the
female
majority?
No, because
Okay, so it's not the
historically,
majority.
because of, you have to take into the historical
Mhm.
perspective.
What is stopping a woman today from being a plumber and electrician?
As I said, discrimination,
Why there's
hostile workplaces, because they are made to feel as if they don't belong in those spaces. And why would you want to exist in a space where you're constantly made to feel like you shouldn't be there by the men in those positions? So men will make women feel like they don't belong there and then
Mhm.
complain that women aren't there. So
What's your evidence for that?
what's my
Yeah,
evidence for
what's your
that?
evidence for that?
Oh, they've
Have
studied it. They've studied like workplace discrimination.
with women in
Yeah, in male
electrical,
dominated fields. Yeah.
and they've said that the women feel like they're not wanted, and that's
Yes.
why they're not doing it.
Not just not
That's very
wanted, not
that's
welcome.
very convenient. You know, here's the thing. Men don't care if they're not welcomed. They don't expect people to just accept them into a group like women do because again, men live in the real world. Women do not. We live in this play pretend world where we're given more credit for what we actually do than we do.
hmm So I've seen you speak many
Mhm.
times about the detrimental effects that all of these things have on men's mental health and that they have a higher rate of suicide, they have how all these
Mhm.
things. And so I think that it's really interesting that you care a lot seemingly
Mhm.
about men's mental health, but
Mhm.
then at the same time you'll say, "Oh, men don't care if you're mean to them, men don't care if they're not welcomed." You say all of these things that have an impact on men's mental health. So
Mhm.
I think to care about one, you have to recognize how it impacts the other.
What I'm saying is men understand that that's the real world and they know there's nothing they can do to change that.
There is plenty that we can do.
Women go into a man's world and they expect to be given special treatment and privileges. They expect to be the new guy in a company and feel welcome. I mean, it's not abnormal for men to haze somebody in a new group. You might say that's wrong, but it's not abnormal and they don't complain, they don't strike, they don't protest. They just accept it and they accept the world as it is instead of doing a wish list that will never become true.
I mean, do they really accept it and are they really okay with it when the statistics behind men's mental health proves that it does impact them? They just internalize it.
Mhm.
Women make sure that we prioritize empathy and communication. So when we feel like we're not being welcomed, when we feel like we're being wronged, we want to improve the communication
We
to improve
complain.
the
We're better at
circumstance.
complaining.
I would say we're better at
Complaining.
communication.
That's better at complaining about the stuff we don't like, where men don't complain. That's what I said.
Right, they don't complain because they internalize it, and then
They don't
instead they just
complain. They
unalive
don't
themselves.
complain.
That's
No,
not
they
a
don't
proper
complain
coping
because the
strategy.
world doesn't give them sympathy.
Yeah.
Young women get a ton of sympathy on the internet complaining about their problems. It's why they're given 10 times the funding for breast cancer research instead of prostate cancer. It's because people care about women's issues. People do not care about men's issues.
I disagree.
Why?
Why do I
You
disagree
could
that
say you disagree, but that's not an argument.
I mean, your arguments are just like, "Oh, that's silly and I live in reality." Like you're not giving me any realistic like responses
Well,
either.
I'm giving you realistic responses. I said men do the majority of infrastructure jobs. They're the majority of workplace deaths. And so based on those two stats, they have a harder work environment and they complain less.
Yeah,
If you
and
look at the industries that strike and complain, it tends to be female dominated industries because women are better at complaining.
no,
They
because
want to do less of the work and they want more of the credit.
we care about how we're treated, as men should care how they're treated. And they do care, they just internalize it. Just because they don't take action doesn't mean that they don't care.
So the next topic I think we're going to go into is, do you think society discriminates more against men or women, or do you think it's equal?
I think that they discriminate more against women, but I don't, that's not to say that men aren't discriminated against in some aspects.
Okay, how are women more discriminated against?
As I've said before, in my own personal experience and
Other than
statistically,
other than can we do something other than just people say mean words to me? Because men, by the time they're 22, somebody said a mean word to them. Usually it's a woman. So
Mm.
anything other than somebody said something I don't like.
Abortion bans. Can you name a law that controls what men can do and access healthcare and the healthcare that men can access?
Mhm.
Is there any laws that control men's healthcare access?
Well, if you want to talk about men's body, men are required to go into selective service. So if
Hmm.
there is a wartime, they are required to be drafted.
Yeah, and I think that the
So
draft should be
so there so
abolished.
you asked for a law, there's a law. There's a way that women's bodies aren't protected, there's a way men's bodies aren't
No,
protected.
so it's actually my question was different. My question was, can you name a law that restricts men's access to healthcare?
That restricts men's access to healthcare. No, not off the top of my head.
So there you go. That's one
How are
discriminatory
women
practice.
restricted access to healthcare? You can drive to another state and get an abortion.
Yeah, well, then that's also not taking into account like socioeconomic factors, right? Because not every person has the ability or the funds or the time
Mhm.
to be able to just cross state lines to gain access. We shouldn't have different healthcare access in
Okay.
different states. Your geographical location
Okay.
should not determine your access to a human right.
Okay. Well, again, luckily for women, we have access to birth control, abstinence, and even you can even track your cycle and not get pregnant. So I think there's plenty of options beforehand that it really isn't an excuse if you have an unplanned pregnancy.
So actually, about 50% of unplanned pregnancies used protection. And so that's just
Well,
an incorrect statement.
then you should learn to use it better.
That's
And
not how that works.
the other thing is after the kid's born, you could argue that it's an equally irresponsible move when men and women have unprotected sex or there's some problem with the birth control. Fine, equally irresponsible. But after the woman has more control. She has the
Hmm.
right to she's the only one who gets to decide if she takes a plan B. She's the only one that gets to decide to put him on child support or alimony if they're married. Um, Men don't have a right to their wallets after the kid is born.
Yeah, so pregnancy involves your body and your
Mhm.
internal organs, and that is worth more than any money.
Yeah, but that's okay, that's 9 months, a year. What about the rest of the time? What about 18 years after?
Right. And so then there's like 2 years after that that you're breastfeeding, and then there's the unequal division of childcare and domestic labor. So it's so much more than 9 months. But to go back,
Mhm.
we cannot minimize that 9 months. Having your body be not your own for 9 months is 9 months too long.
Yeah, but there are men dying when they go and do their jobs, and
They
they're
can get a
not
different job.
complaining about it.
They can get a different job.
No, because men understand that somebody has to do it.
Yeah, they don't have to do it.
They understand. Well, that's why it's admirable that they do it anyway and they don't complain. And that's what I keep going back to is what feminists tend to want is they want all of the credit and they want to over exaggerate their problems.
So I would actually like to go back to the comparison you made of pregnancy and men going to work. Do you think those two things are the same?
I think that a man going to a dangerous job is far worse than a woman being pregnant.
And do you think that the majority of
Far
men
far
work?
more dangerous, I'll say. That's more accurate.
And
Better and good is like it's subjective, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and as I've said before, I think that we should have better safety protocols and we
Mhm.
should improve the safety of all workers. So I think that that should be addressed. But
It
also, the majority of
but
men,
it isn't, right? Like, because
right? But are you
when we
arguing
go,
for it to be?
I here's the difference. Okay, so feminists have a tendency to think that if we complain, things will just happen, and I'm more realistic, where I know that just because we say, oh, it should be better, well, it's not,
So
and men understand that because they have had to deal with that reality from a young age.
you recognize that the only reason you have a microphone and you have a show is because feminists complained because we wanted a voice.
That's not
Because
true.
it actually is.
It's not true.
Being having
There's female writers in the 1800s,
and they had to
1700s,
write
and
under male
1600s.
pseudonyms.
It's not true.
It is true.
It's not
It
true.
well, you can say it's not true, but it's
That's
history
not
and it's
true.
statistics. It is.
That's not true.
It is. We used
There
to
were
not
women in
have a
power. We had
voice.
Cleopatra. We had women in power throughout all of history. There are examples of them. The first female property owner was in the 1600s in the United States.
When were women allowed to have their own bank accounts?
Women were allowed to have their own bank accounts in What does that have to do with writing? You're changing the
No,
topic.
no, I'm
You're
not.
changing the topic because I'm right. They were
No.
allowed to write. They were.
You're the one who brought up female
But
writers. That
okay,
wasn't the
go
question.
ahead, go ahead. So, sometime in the 1900s, I can't remember the year.
Yeah, it was like in the 1970s
Yeah, around
is
there.
when women were allowed to have bank accounts. So when we're talking
And
about women,
what's happened since we got bank accounts?
What
We
has
own
happened? You
we
tell
own
me.
80% of the world's debt. There's a reason people did things the way they did.
You don't think that women should be able to have their own bank accounts?
I don't think they shouldn't have bank accounts. I think everyone should have the right, and they do. But there's a reason. I think when we look at the past, we have to look at the reason that people did things. And one of the reasons is women are very irresponsible with money. They own 80% of the world's debt, even though they make less money than men.
So did you know that the majority of household finances are regulated and controlled by women?
Yeah, I knew that. We make 80% of consumer buying decisions.
Yeah.
So that's what I said. They spend.
And you
That's what I said. They
Right,
spend money.
because
They spend money
households-
they don't have.
we do have the money.
Not anymore. I mean, the average woman out of college has $30,000 worth. How much debt do you have? You have to have six figures coming out of
I
med
do have
school.
6 figures
Yeah,
of debt, and
exactly.
the student
And the-
debt. Yeah, because
And
if
the
you
thing is, in your profession, I mean, on average, women leave the medical profession when they have a kid or within 5 years. So odds are you won't pay it off. And I'm not saying you personally, I hope you do, right? I'm not wishing it one way or another, but statistically, women make their debt someone else's problem.
men do the same thing.
No, they don't. So they looked at women paying off their debt and men paying off their college debt, and men have been making payments towards it the last 5 years and women haven't.
So it's funny because you just
Yeah, go ahead.
mentioned how
ahead.
women will leave their careers because they have to take care of children. And that probably plays a large role into why they're not able to pay back their student debt compared to men who continue to be a part of the workforce even after they have children. Do you see how those two things might be correlated?
No, because women aren't having kids anymore. That would have
We
been the
are.
case, maybe the case before, but now they're not really having children.
We are still having children. That's
On
an incorrect
average,
statement.
it's like 1.5 now. So, I mean, if you have one kid, you can put it in daycare. You can still work.
You can put it in daycare.
Sorry, his or hers.
Yeah. See, and this is the problem is when we see people as commodities instead of actual people, that's where we run into this thing of I don't care how you feel, you make stupid decisions, instead of taking a nuanced perspective and the complexity of the human experience and recognizing that there are so many things that contribute into these cherry-picked statistics.
Well, you think that the world owes you understanding, and it doesn't.
I think that it does. I think that we owe everybody understanding. I think that in order for me, so you know what? I think that this is something we need to clarify.
Yeah, go ahead.
I partake in these conversations because I want a better world. I develop my opinions based on how I think or based on what I think is going to improve the human condition and improve people's quality of life. Why do you take part in these conversations?
I like to report on what's going on.
Okay, so you have no desire to improve the world and to be an advocate for change and progression.
It would be nice, but I don't expect it.
See, and for me, one of my favorite quotes is the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. And you can
In
call
my
me a
experience,
dreamer.
they're the ones who do not.
I mean, historically, you're wrong.
I don't think so.
Martin Luther King had a dream, didn't he?
Okay, but how many guys tried to be Martin Luther King and failed? I'm not
Right.
saying there
And
are people,
that's a
but
societal issue because we resist progression, and you're one of the people who is allowing society to resist progression instead of allowing progression to happen.
how am I allowing society to? What does that even mean?
Yeah, so you
Okay, no, go ahead. Go ahead. It's fine.
Yeah, because you say, I see the reality right now and I report on the reality right now. And when I say, yeah, we should recognize what's happening now and improve on it, you say, oh, men are dying in the workplace. And I'm like, okay, let's address that. Let's see why they're doing that. Let's see how we can improve on that. And then you're like, yeah, that's not realistic. I live in reality. Where you see how I am advocating for progression. I'm advocating for improvement. Where you're just like, yeah, you know what? That's not the world we live in. And I don't have any idea or any desire to improve on the shitty statistics that I constantly report on.
Yeah, so I think that sounds nice, but again, it doesn't change the reality of the situation. So you saying something on a podcast doesn't change the amount of men that die every year in a crab fishing boat. But what I like to do is be as accurate as I possibly can